You, I think, are probably one of the most powerful manifestors there are.
I won an entire fully furnished house.
What a personal journey it would be.
The enlistment rate of the United States Armed Forces is the lowest it's ever been. You cannot tune out of what's going on in the world.
Something as horrific as 9/11 created that impact.
Podcasting is in that same spot that YouTube was in 2012. I don't think I was ready to embrace the idea of like being a leader.
You need to know what your team wants.
Case by case, they were the worst things that I'd ever gone through.
How are you going to create this impact?
Our goal is get you to think biggest.
Spirituality and capitalism belong together. Those thoughts, those feelings, that comes from something bigger than I am. And together I believe we can all grow. That's how we're going to change the world. That's how we're going to change the planet.
All right. Well, today I'm joined by Brady Edwards, and he is the founder of Biggest, which is a studio out of Scottsdale, Arizona, and they focus on really taking somebody's identity or their brand or their messaging, and they do everything they can to make it the biggest it possibly can. Years ago, he worked with a gentleman by the name of MrBeast, which for those that are not familiar with that, it's one of the largest YouTube shows on the planet. And that's how he kind of cut his teeth in film. And he's got all the war stories that go with it. So, but instead of going there today and talking about his background with MrBeast and all the things he had learned, which I think are really valid, instead we're going to kind of do things a little bit different. So, The Spiritual Capitalist, we have now reached 1,000 subscribers.
Let's go.
So we're slowly growing. And I thought it'd be interesting to bring you out to the studio, or your studio,
It's
technically.
crazy. Yeah, I was here. How did I?
You literally walked
hopped in
in
the next room.
from your desk over here. But I thought I would have the conversation with you of what it's like running a studio and what it's like instead of, standing on the side of, working with MrBeast, and now you're running your whole entire own operations, the brand you're working with, and a lot about what it takes for someone like The Spiritual Capitalist or other shows that you produce, because you help produce us and, you help focus and bring us the vision and so on. What it's like to even put this stuff together, because it seems like you and your partner and your staff, they just sleep here. So it's
We've considered it.
yeah.
You got
I
some
know
comfy
you have.
couches, man.
But it's really impressive what you built here, though.
Thank you. You've been a huge part of that.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. I remember when we first met, we met in Salt Lake City, Utah.
That's right.
And we met at this place called Jump. And one of the things I think is really cool about this conversation is that you were helping me get in this suit, and we started talking, and you were saying, oh yeah, I run this camera and I've done this stuff. And by the way, have you ever heard of this show, MrBeast? And I'm like, nope, don't even know what that thing is. And then you said, well, this really cool thing happened to me. So you, I think, are probably one of the most powerful manifestors there are, based upon you've actually been able to manifest a physical item that I think most people would love to have at this moment in time if they don't have one. What was that?
I want a house. I had this call with William, who's my business partner. And at the time, we were in the middle of just back-to-back everyday shooting, and we'd been prepping this video. We're going to go give away houses for $1 each. No one's going to believe it, because who would do that?
Right.
And we'd given away 3 at that point. And on the 4th house, I ended up winning one of them. And the weird thing was 2 days prior to that, I was on a phone call with William. And you've talked about it. You've had him on the show.
Sure.
The idea,
William Lamb's, incredible.
Shout out William.
Yeah, we love him over here.
And he gave me framework that at the time when I was just in my grind, I think most people can relate to, like, I'm in my job, I'm doing my thing. I barely have time to look ahead and see where the puck is going because I'm just surviving, And that's kind of where I was. Like, all I wanted was a nap. But he said, we got on a phone call and he says, like, what do you want out of life? And I just couldn't think past, I want a nap.
Or were you, at that time, you're still working for MrBeast, right?
Yeah, we were on a COVID lockdown. And so I was quarantined in my house. And so I had a little bit of time finally. So I'd heard about William and I got on a call with him, got really lucky there. And so he was interested because of my position as the video director of now the world's largest YouTube channel. He's like, yeah, let's talk, And so he reframes me and just simply asks me, if life's a sandbox, man, and you could pick anything, like, what would that thing be? Like, what would you just want to appear out of thin air other than something like it could be a supercar? But I was like, I'm renting, I'm 28. I would love to just have a house. So then lo and behold, 2 days later, I won an entire fully furnished house. And it was the weirdest experience of my life. It's been seen like 200 million times on YouTube. And that struck me in a way that nothing else has. It didn't even occur to me at the time. But then in retrospect, I went, hold on, I kind of asked for that 2 days prior. What do I make of that? And so I was forced for the first time to confront that. What if the way that I'm describing my life, what if the way that I'm calling things towards me, just maybe in a wishful sense or in a manifestation sense, right? Manifesting is it's kind of beaten to death, and it's the tip of the iceberg. But what if I really started focusing not on the things I don't want? I don't want to be sick. I don't want my friends to think I'm a jerk. I don't want my job to fail or my company to go south. I presuppose those things by saying I don't want them, right? So William's thing is don't think about a pink elephant. Everybody you hear that, you go, oh, there's the pinkest, trunkiest elephant you've ever seen. And like, what is that? Well, the brain has to presuppose something in order to try and cancel it out. Oh, well, don't think about that pink elephant. Well, it's going to happen. So don't think about these things. Well, what if you focus on what you want? And that kind of led to this insane journey that ultimately has led to this. I wanted a film studio. I wanted amazing clients. I wanted to grow a company that took principles about psychology and consumer attention and video, which I've always been in. I grew up as a child actor. So I was in front of the camera. Now I'm behind it. And it's been this whole spectrum of cameras. So like, what do I want to do? I want to help people communicate their message better and think not in a big way or, hey, I'm outsourcing it now, I'm thinking bigger. Our goal is get you to think biggest. And most of the time, people are just happy if they get a number on the board. Like, I have an idea, and then they roll with it. But if you don't push that idea, if you don't iterate it or just move the ball a little bit further than where you started, someone else with much better content or better planning or a better idea process is going to take that attention that was there on the table, and your video is going to go on the bottom of the rank. So that's
you're definitely, I mean, from that angle, you're definitely competing with a lot of people. But when somebody gets a house, and by MrBeast, it's going to go viral, right? It's going to get out there in front of a lot of people. So William tells you this point in time, this isn't about William, but I mean, he is definitely part of the journey for me in the fact that I was working with William and going through some things that way. And he says, hey, check out this place when we had met. And I remember leaving that and I thought, what the hell? What do you mean you want a house? That's pretty crazy. And who's this? And who is this guy? And then about a year later, I think, we ran back and forth. You'd moved to Arizona. And I remember sitting down with you at one of the trainings. We were having dinner. It was myself, you, and your girlfriend, and we're having dinner. And you go, what are you doing, Dalton? I said, wow, I got some things going with my company. I'm now sitting on our board. And I've been like really leaning into this concept of, before we had this show called we had a show called Addicted to Freedom, which was about addiction. Mm-hmm. And I remember telling those stories. I'd go on and basically turn the lights down low and, would have to get in this very meditative state. And I would be speaking to people that are suffering from addiction.
Right.
And I was speaking to family members and friends that I knew that were suffering and going through things because it was something I had saw so prominently. But it was exhausting. And I also knew that I really had a lot to say, and I wanted to meet a lot of really great people and explore these things out loud and publicly to see what kind of, to see what is capable of humans, right? Well past addiction, even though that is something I will always fight for and do my best to find solutions for. But I knew that just wasn't a place that I wanted to spend a lot of time. And I had gotten some really deep messages through meditation, like, hey, listen, you need to close this down. And so it didn't run a whole long because it just wasn't in my heart. And then when you and I had spoke, I said, yeah, I'm going to do this show called the Dalton Locke Show. I'm like, yeah, it's just going to be about me traveling around doing these things. And you were like, and I remember you.
I did say this.
Yeah, no, tell me what you said. Go ahead.
I just said that was lame.
Yeah, you said that is a lame idea, Dalton. And I'm like, oh man, well, that's...
If I didn't care, I wouldn't tell you.
Oh, right. And at that moment, I said, well, what do you mean? And you go, it just doesn't explain you. And I go, all right. And he goes, well, Brady says, you told me. He said, hey, think about this a little bit more. Like, what would be a better name? Like, what would be something that would capture kind of who you are, your journeys, your experience? And I thought, oh, man, I'm not really sure what that is. And I always tell people, and I remember sitting with you at dinner, and I said, I always tell people that I'm basically a spiritual hippie.
A capitalistic hippie.
A capitalistic hippie. That's right. I would say that I was that's correct. And then that day, for some reason or another, I said the exact opposite of that. Yeah. I said, yeah, more like a spiritual capitalist. And you're like, That's the name. I'm buying the domain now. We're doing this
That's
now.
the one, man.
And you knew it. And it was the one that I've said a couple times on our show is that was the one that really kind of jarred me in the fact that the name felt like it was doing this and grinding,
Yes.
right? And so on one side, you're polarizing one group over here. And on the other side, you're polarizing another group over here. And I've said to you many times, like, if we're doing anything, this is not going to be about clickbait or, a bunch of tactics or whatever. Just real conversations with real people that we're exploring consciousness, we're exploring all kinds of concepts together, but not because we're seeking ratings. It's because we're truly looking to create impact. And you're like, then that's the name, bro.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's going to bring in those individuals that are seeking for that balance and knowing that there's a different way as you're exploring those things together. What gave you that insight?
From a brand perspective, looking at Addicted to Freedom, who's going to listen to that? It's people that recognize they have an addiction and are seeking out resources for it. I would say most people are dealing with some kind of addiction. So that's a broad audience, but the people willing to address it or deal with it in the form of, say, a podcast, I don't think that's a huge group. However, when we landed on Spiritual Capitalist, that splits everybody pretty well down the middle. You can be a capitalist and not own a business. You're just working. And you can be, spiritual, and that's a lot of people too. But I would say that capitalistic people are probably more open to the idea of looking into their spiritual roots. So this is fun because it pisses everybody off. And so spiritual people, quote unquote spiritual people, if you're going to put a big obnoxious label across all of them, may not feel like they can embrace their spirituality and also find capitalistic opportunities. So like you said, it grinds against the two of them. So, the fit there is just intrinsic because it pisses people off. And we see it in the comments already. Like every day on your shorts, people are like, you can't do this. And they go like long rants, man. And that's how you know you're onto something. We went to Vid Summit and I met this guy. His name's Alex Ferrari, and he's a podcast wizard. And so he and I talked forever. And he has this show called, I think it's called Deep Soul or Old Soul or whatever. I sent it to you. Mm-hmm. And his whole show is about spirituality and near-death experiences. And that's kind of his theme. And he's really found like an angle there, and people love it. And I told him about your show, and he's like, oh, everyone's going to get mad. It's like, because when I talk about business, anything in any of my episodes, the comment section goes on fire. And so what we're seeing there is this bizarre point of friction that's not obvious until you stumble across it. And why is it that people put these things in two separate bins? Because the in-between of that is an opportunity that no one else has found. That's why I love podcasting. That's why I like content creation right now. In basically up into the 2000s, the best, most accessible version of what we have now would be like a local broadcast station, Channel 4 News, and you had to have a satellite truck, and you had to have all these like teams and camcorders and obnoxious equipment, and then you could kind of go out and film car crashes, and that was it, right? But that was the equivalent of like a localized station that niches down into something you're interested in. Why? Because, it's my town. And that was kind of the best that you could get. The next near equivalent to niching down and drawing people in would be like a magazine. Like this is the magazine for black female tennis players, but you really couldn't do that in a visual medium, like not with video. Now
Right.
You can. Now there's somewhere between what magazines understand, which is you have all these very niche communities with a very specific interest, and we have tech that has blown the barriers to entry wide open. And so you can be a local broadcast station and kind of mesh the two together. So living with MrBeast, like during COVID and then running the channel and doing all these things, I look for things that introduce friction or like piss people off or would strike a chord where you're like, that's bizarre. I met this guy and he works at a recycling facility and he's like the director of it. And he wants to start a YouTube channel, and people pitch me their channels all the time. And most of the time I'm like, good luck. But then he goes, no, like I want to build things out of recycled products. And I went, that has got legs, man.
Yeah,
you can
I
take
love
that
that
in a million directions, right? So there are obvious subjects that I can tell. The substrate of that is very interesting. People will come back over and over again because the nature of it can change so much. The nature of spiritual capitalism is here are 10,000 lessons that the business world, the private sector can teach you. And then here are 100,000 personal, insightful lessons that spirituality, a tough time, plant medicine, whatever it could be, you'll get crazy lessons from both. Let's blend them and just see what happens. It's kind of explosive.
Well, it's interesting because it was never, to me, it was never meant to be like this ever. To me, it just made sense. I mean, our businesses have been built upon spiritual practices, and it's been built upon, trying to do our best to do right by people and, just a bunch of other things. And so I'm like, okay, so it's either, what I'm recognizing more and more is that people just don't understand that they actually do belong together.
Yeah.
And there is something higher always working in the background, whether someone's religious, whether they're spiritual, whether they're agnostic, whatever it might be. We all know that there's something, just like when I had said the term to you, spiritual capitalism, and it hits you somewhere. It either hits you in your heart, but it hits you at your core somewhere where you're like, there was a frequency that you're like, oh, that's it. Like where that it comes from could be from study, could be from a lot of things. But I think that everything is looking to be birthed somehow or another, right? And it takes somebody to be able to help create that seed, which is what I love about what you do. Because it's like, okay, Dalton, here's this seed. And by the way, are you willing to do the work? Which is, are you personally willing to do the work? Are you willing to create this? Are you willing to put your money where your mouth is? Are you willing to also let go of a little bit of your control? Like there's a lot of stuff that has to go on there and to trust the process, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's about trusting your team. It's about trusting your own team. It's about me trusting you. I mean, this is it's a whole entire co-creation. It's not my creation. I'm a piece of the creation, but I am not the creation. I mean, behind the scenes, we have, social media, we have PR, we have design, graphics,
developers.
we have developers, we have people doing editing, we have people helping with some of the writing, and there's just a lot of stuff that I had no idea to do this thing, quote unquote, right. Like how much time, energy, effort, cash, and what a personal journey it would be. Because I've called you more times than not and saying, you know what, I don't think that I really am cut out to do this. Like, I like the idea, but we're a year into this thing now. We're still not live. We're still building studios. We're dealing with camera equipment. We're dealing with trying to book guests. We're trying to figure out what our media packages are and a whole slew of other things that I think if someone's going to do this, they better have a real reason. And I've said this about many things, or a real purpose, because if not, they're going to end up quitting. Because it's a lot of challenges.
Yeah, most podcasts don't make it past 7 episodes. That's just a hard, fast statistic. It's like 80% of them. Because the grind of it is really, you can't understand what it means to be consistent with content, which I hate that word. I prefer story, but circularly everybody understands content. It's like, oh, it's this thing you produce. But like to make 7 pieces of content that you really planned out and then deploy all of them, and then that 8th one just is like, oh my gosh, like I have to do this again. Before MrBeast, I worked on a channel called Tanner Fox. So it's this, at the time, he was 18 years old, and the kid had 10 million subscribers. So I lived in California in this 18-year-old's mansion. And next to my bedroom was a garage full of supercars, like $3 million worth of cars. And so I'm like, this is the craziest experience of my life. But what I learned living there is we had a posting schedule of every other day, which means one day was dedicated to filming, which means that day of filming, there had to be a lot of pre-production planning going into it. What are we doing? Because if we're going to film it, it can't be a half-baked idea. So you have to plan the whole idea out. You have to shoot it that whole day. And then my job, including managing the house full of children, was to edit it. And so I would then stay up the entire night and edit it, deploy it on YouTube the next day, and then get like 4 or 5 hours of sleep and do it over again. I did that for a year. And so to like share that with somebody, like here's my experience, it's not going to get correctly conveyed. Just like what is it like to scale like the top 5 fastest growing companies in Utah? You can't effectively tell me what that's like, but I can just kind of take the anecdote and be like, oh, that's crazy. So then people have to sit down with the camera and then the piece of paper in front of them, say, what is my message to the world? And that's when that wall kind of hits them. Oh man, like I actually am not really clear on that. And then if I can get something out, well, this should go viral. Everyone should see it. It should get 1 million views, right? It's like, no, not at all. Because you have to then consider a spectrum of other things. Like, what is the experience of the cold viewer? That person somehow found you. YouTube teed them up. The algorithm guided them to your page. Did you consider their experience moment for moment when they clicked on your video? And that may seem like nuance to people because they're like, trust me, my ad for my company, ooh, you get like 20 seconds in. they're going to buy. And it's like, well, they don't start the video 20 seconds in, bro. They
No,
started
they
second
don't.
one, and second one sucked. And that is a snapshot of how I approach things and how we consider everything is so mission critical. So like, you'll send us stuff and I'll be like, hey, we really got to trim up that beginning. I want the conversation to like really have clarity all through it. That's why I knew that you were going to be good at this, is because you ask questions that pass the ball back and forth very well. And I work with a lot of people where they have to bang their head against a wall for like 4 or 5 years to learn how to be entertaining to listen to. That's one. The second thing is they have to know how to address a problem, or they have to have some very specific approach to, here's a million topics. Who are they a master at like 2 or 3 of those topics? And then do they have a network of people that are masters of other topics? Because the inference between those two as a conversation is going to lead to like something really magical. Most people like have a hard time stacking all of that up, and it'll take years for them to get humbled enough to go, that's why my first 100 videos didn't work. Then you're ready to learn. And I only share that as an anecdote. People have to do it. And then you, having already done that with Addicted to Freedom and a handful of other efforts that you've had, you finally understood like, oh, okay, this is much better going as a team. And then if I can rely on people with expertise, I actually will skip a lot of the learning curve.
Oh, I can go much further. I've learned that at Mint 45. I've learned that right now, as we're building tech and software out with Pono, I've been learning that. Right now we're having this conversation. I've also got, 125 employees working in Salt Lake City. We've got other employees working throughout the world at this moment in time, right? And they're all very clear on the missions. They're all clear on the impact. When I met you, and you decided to open up Biggest, I was like, cool, I want to get behind this, because I loved who you are as an individual. You carry a lot of light, you're happy, you're a hard worker, you're determined, you're independent, and you're super creative.
Thanks, man.
And you have this ability to be able to orchestrate this. You're the orchestrator of this orchestra. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's a symphony for content.
That's what I was gonna. Yeah, exactly. So, but when you first started, I remember you kind of being a little bit hesitant, trying to kind of navigate into these waters of, opening up a business, signing on a lease, buying video equipment, putting yourself obviously into a place of debt and all of that. And then you had this, because a dream requires that. Dream requires going all in. But I remember watching you, and the one thing I saw that I believed you were missing, and this kind of goes back into the spiritual side of capitalism, and that was your team. You had a lot of young guys that were around you,
right,
that you had found basically. You had some serendipitous things happen where people literally knocked on your door. They knew who you were because of YouTube. They quit their job and they followed you into the storm.
Yeah.
A brand new storm.
Right.
And we sat down at dinner, and there's some things I want to kind of recount with you that I do believe ties into the spiritual side of business. And that is, you had these young men that were looking up to you and trusting you for you to lead them down the path of their success.
Yeah. I don't think I was ready to embrace the idea of like being a leader. And that, like, everything from, oh my gosh, I'm signing a commercial lease with a company like Whitestone REIT, where if we can't make rent, we are in deep water, with a massive entity. Those like broaching that I have to be responsible for somebody's rent and their ability to buy groceries. Anecdotally, I understood that because I had a lot of proximity to the creators that I worked with. And so I always worked for somebody and very close to them. And I would hear the stress like, well, you worry about that, man, because I got to make sure that I can take care of your payroll. And I was like, okay, whatever, right? I would kind of slough it off because that's not my job was to bury Jimmy alive and make sure he didn't die. I didn't have to actually worry about payroll and insurance. But now that I'm the founder, all of these new things have come up and I've had to navigate them one by one. And you were a big help with that because you reset my frame on it where I'm like, yeah, I have these guys and we're close. I love them, but they live their lives and we work together. And you were like, well, they look up to you. And I guess to a degree I understood that, but probably not as deeply as I needed to. And it was that I am the next closest, I'm their leader and I need to own that. I have to be a leader. And what does that look like? Having hard conversations, expecting more out of them, setting a tone where I'll outwork all of you. And if I can do that and set a precedent for here's the best way to win. And even if you're not with me for the next, you're with me for 5 years, but then on year 6, you go off and do your own thing. My goal now is to make sure that wherever you go, you are a better, more effective person because I didn't cut you any slack, but I also gave you grace. I gave you love, and I showed you how to be a good man. And by extension, an incredible worker, creator. And if I can do that for somebody else, like they may stay with me for 20 years. They may go off and do their own thing. I just want to see people win. And I've worked at companies where they would paint the culture and say, it's a stormy world out there. Like if you leave, there's just no other company like this, man. It's going to be tough. You're going to hate it. You're just never going to want to leave, man. And if you do, it's going to be brutal. So just make sure you don't leave. And I'm like, kind of want to leave.
Yeah. They're like, we're going to handcuff you and we're going to like make sure that you don't go anywhere. And we're going to keep you in the dark and tell you that it's terrible out there. Nobody else does what we do. Like
5 companies that come to
but there's
mind.
a lot of,
oh my gosh.
I can think of a lot of companies like that. But the one thing is that when you and I were having that conversation, I said to you, I said, Brady, you need to know what your team wants. Because if you can help them get what they want, they're going to help you get what you want. How has that affected? I mean, it's been a year now of this experiment, really. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you look at it, your company, leadership, understanding what your team wants. I watch you do you guys have a lot of close relationships. You're doing pool parties and all kinds of things, but you're also working really in a really tight environment together, right? Like basically, right by each other day in, day out.
6 days a week, usually.
Yeah, exactly. You're working really hard. How has that form of leadership and understanding what your team wants and also not losing fact of your dream and goals, but how has it changed you from focusing on them versus you focusing just on the business alone?
Well, the company is the sum of its parts.
Mm-hmm.
I've worked at places where the fish stinks from the head down. And so the founder more or less sets the tone. And so if the founder has kind of a toxic attitude or pride or he wants to be the king and everybody else wants to sit there and kind of do this Game of Thrones politics game, who gets to be closest to the king. If that's the precedent, you create a really unhealthy environment. And I've worked in multiple companies that are run that way. I don't know how they get to that point. Maybe it's a combination of a lot of money coming in or fame or whatever. And that's not naming names, not anyone specific,
Sure.
right? But I saw it firsthand and I thought, man, when I own my own business, I don't want to be that. Like I want to, life has whittled me down and tried to take everything. I've had my identity stolen multiple times from close family. I've been fired. I've been kicked to the curb. I've been lied about, all these things. And at the time, case by case, they were the worst things that I'd ever gone through. But they allowed me to either sit there and wallow and use these as crutches to justify a crappy long-term attitude, or they were a refining fire. And I was able to be a better man as a result of it. And you're faced with that option every time you go through garbage, tough things I didn't ask for, whether it was something totally existential and I didn't expect it, or it was somebody close to me that whatever it is, those things are going to happen to you. And so the decision to approach it with light and understanding and patience pays out way more. You get so much more mileage than letting it embitter you. And I think that probably sounds like a trite thing to say in the face of some challenges that other people deal with, like really horrible things.
Of course.
Like, oh, your car got stolen, poor baby. It's like, I lost half my family. And it's
yeah,
like,
yes, that's what empathy is about, right? Like just because, it's like, oh, well, you think you've gone through a bad situation? Let me tell you about mine.
Listen
like,
up, pal.
Here you go. It's about being empathetic and being like, man, I can feel you. And I don't know how many times I say this, but I really, truly, it was very impactful to me. The word lo siento in Spanish is I'm sorry. But also it means I feel you, right? And so if it's I feel you, I feel your pain, I feel your sorrow. So it's not about downplaying whether it was good or bad, but your car's stolen, can't get anywhere, can't do anything, losing your identity, all these things. It feels like it's smashing you against the ground, constantly trying to grind you into nothing. And some people, they allow that. And some people, they find themselves at the bottom of a bottle. They find themselves addicted to things. They find themselves not being able to get back up from that. And some people find themselves as that is a way to whittle them down, to rebuild them into something greater so that they can actually serve more people. Because that's what it's about, is service. Because if we're just serving ourselves, it becomes really boring. It gets really old. And there's only so much shit you can buy, and there's only so many things you can do. But it's a lot better having experiences with other people and seeing other people win.
Yes.
Like I love seeing people win. I actually was talking to your crew today and I said, I want to know how much better you are this year versus a year ago from now. Like how much have you grown internally, but also how much is your skill set grown? And they're all like, oh yeah, we're just growing, and listening to them talk like, hey, I'm going to take on that new project and I want that. Like there's an excitement versus a level of beatdown, but it does come from the top to the bottom. But it's because of that whittling down. It's because you've been through those things that you're able to help these young men and women build themselves back up. And it's because you care about the people you work with. Because you and I, we've gone back and forth. We've had disagreements. We've had celebrations. We've had, creative conversations. You've told me straight up, like, that isn't going to work. And I'm like, no, this is what we're going to do. And you're like, Dalton. I'm like, all right, you win. This is
Or we went with your way, and then we were like, crap.
Or we've done that too, right? So, and it's that learning process, right? And I'm willing to play the game because I'm listening to my intuition thinking, okay, I might have this figured out. And I literally don't have it figured out. And so I have to be humble enough to say, okay, there's a lot of places I know what I'm doing, and this one is not one of them. But it takes somebody caring enough about the subject, about the content. And I know that you're particular about the groups of people you work with. It's not just about the money. It's about the impact that you're making. What is the impact you guys are actually making here at Biggest?
It's a better story. I think we as a species are the way that we are now because story, before language was written, before it was codified, we told stories over the campfire. And that was how we were able to exchange and share sentiment that lasted past that person's lifetime. And the best stories are the ones that have been carried forever. And now people's attention span are whittled to fractions of a second because they'll consume 1,000 stories. And most of them are like 3 out of 10 if you're lucky. And then you'll get one and you go, wow, that had me end to end. That was an amazing story. It drew me in. What was that? And so trying to understand the timeless nature of a story and then looking at it through the lens of 2024 with iPhones, with these insane processors and these algorithms that are designed to hijack your amygdala and to take your attention and hold it for as long as possible to increase session time. How do you take the lifelong principle of story and the way it might make you feel, and the colors that it might make you see, and the smells and the nostalgia it might take you back to, and design 2024 attention spans to still somehow bridge those two things? And it's not obvious to people. But what I've learned is that over time, everybody has a story. Some of it just needs refining. And so if we can help people, this is like the most difficult year for most people. Inflation's really high. The election is stressful. There are shifting factors that impact people's employment and whether or not they're going to make groceries and ends meet. And so everybody is looking for some hope and some optimism. And the majority of media that I see going out is really not designed to uplift. It's designed to subvert. It's designed to give you a framework that they want so that you will continue eating out of their hand, because in times of crisis, our reptilian brain shifts to our nearest most position of authority, because that allows them to feel safe. If the world doesn't feel safe, our reptilian brain goes, where's the authority figure that can tell me what to do to feel safe? And most of the time, that is co-opted. It's hijacked in order to keep your attention longer and to push advertising in front of you in that altered, fearful state. So for me, every single person I work with, I want them to tell a better story. I want them to push something out that has a ripple effect, even if right now it's 1,000 subscribers, that in legacy, the catalog of what we're building will have a long-term impact on shaping humanity. David Morehouse is in the other room right now, and you've had a few episodes with him. We're doing one soon, actually. And he talks about this, I don't know what institute it is, but they somehow monitor the collective well-being and the collective sentiment of the population. There are indications, I don't know how they gather the data, but there are different types of sensors that can more or less measure the collective mood of society. And I don't know if they do it across polling or whatever. But David shared the story where 5 minutes before 9/11, all of these readings, all of these marking devices or these tracking devices had this massive spike, a disproportionate spike that they hadn't seen ever. And so it was a common sentiment. And then on this graph, boom, up, way high, 5 minutes before the Twin Towers were struck. And there is this understanding, this leads into the spiritual side of the show, that we are all one. And mushrooms, kind of a new thing for me. I thought that was kind of a dorky, hippie thing that people said. But then you actually get a sense of when you can pull the blinders off of our primate brain and actually feel a resonance with another person. You kind of go, well, maybe there is something to that. Maybe we are like connected. Maybe we're all experiencing life through a trillion different eyes, but we're all one collective entity. If that's the case, we're all kind of tied together. And so a terrorist attack, like the towers getting hit, might send some sort of anxiety spike through everybody, and we might not even know why. We're not in New York. And so I say all of that to say, if I could have 1,000 shows going out, and those 1,000 shows are impacting 100 million people, and those 100 million people either have a new data set with which to look at life through, to interpret some of the propaganda, some of the nonsense, or to encourage them to hold the door open for somebody else at Starbucks, or to help that person on the side of the road with a flat tire. If those things can happen and I can be at the epicenter of that, steering it, and then just be choosy as hell with who I work with and say, you must have a high bar of ecology and ethics, because I will help get your story out there. It's not going to be overnight, because podcasting, it's pretty thankless at first. Content creation is pretty thankless. And you don't know what your message is and how it's being received yet. So we've got to really iron that out. But when we do, and we will, we're going to have long-term impact. And impact seems like such a platitude of a word. And even when you've asked me that, I'm kind of like, I feel like I have a level 5 understanding of that. And you're sitting there playing it at like level 78. The first time we met, you're like, yeah, I have an NFT that's going to go save the rhinoceroses. I was like, who the hell is this guy? That's crazy.
That was the thought of that time. That's actually what led to this.
Yes.
Like that failure, because it led to this. And what I'm hearing you say, which I got so much like energy and emotions going through me at this moment in time, that stories is what has held us together from a long time. And those stories have been passed down from generations to generations, and we're still telling stories. But the problem is where the algorithm, right, is rewarding those stories are for violence, things that are separating us, things that are making our cortisol levels go up, keeping us in a constant like fight or flight, or me against them. And what you're telling me is I want to give stories that are positive, that are going to change the way that people think and interact with each other, because it's going to be working on the subconscious side of things. And if it's working on the subconscious side of things, it's then going to create the same kind of impact that I'm looking for, that something as horrific as 9/11 created that impact. It's going to start creating this impact. And I had no idea, like I just saw so much insight, and that was the whole conversation about 1,000 monkeys, right? 1,000 monkeys on an island, 10% of them change. It changes the whole entire dynamic of everybody. So if you take all of these creators that you're putting together, your superheroes, right? Thank you for letting me be on the squad. You know what I mean? As I'm practicing with
Thanks for being on the squad, man.
with my like wannabe cape at the moment. We'll get there one day. But is learning to practice and going through these things and doing my best to share stories that I believe that are credible, open, honest, insightful, and also real, instead of just a bunch of BS or trying to orchestrate how the conversation is going to go, but just having an open dialogue. So it's not an interview, it's a conversation. But with that those stories actually are the tool that creates the impact, right? It changes the world because of the way that the narrative is now being spun this way instead of the way it's being spun now, because that's what rewards the algorithm. But sharing things that are actually going to have people see things differently, think about things differently, and see how great they are or how much capacity they have in order to be able to expand who they are as human beings.
Yes.
Right? Coming from a place of honest or love or surrender or openness or care, and all of us expanding in our own consciousness to be, well, more of who we are already. Because we are already these things. We've just kind of taken mud and stacked it on top of us and not realized that's, wait a minute, you were born this way. You just forgot along the path.
We're all sponges of media right now, and we have been actually since the TV. And those TV messages have been, here's today's synopsis of why you should be afraid. And that looks like a million different things. There's this meme that's all over Twitter, and it's a guy, and his head is inside the guillotine, and it's about to drop on him. And his speech bubble says, I don't really care about politics. And then the caption is, politics cares about you. And so that typically, for me, like, I'm very interested in U.S. foreign policy. I grew up in the military. My dad, I found out on my 30th birthday, it's the weirdest birthday gift ever, that my dad, the reason I was born in Germany was he was contracted by CIA to monitor the collapse of the Soviet Union and how it impacted East Germany. My dad has a piece of the Berlin Wall. So that's how I was raised. It was weird, really weird. And I've always been taught to pick at the seams of the story, pull a thread and just see what that thread gives you. Because if you can pick at the seams of reality and not just accept this canned response or this canned narrative or whatever, you will look at life with more nuance, because everything has nuance. I look at you and I know a lot about you. I don't know 1% about you or your story realistically, and your decisions and the hard times and the things, and then the arc and the loss and the wins. I don't really know those things. I didn't live your life. So there's nuance to it. And if I don't allow for that nuance, I'm not really understanding you, but I can kind of create a cute little bumper sticker and be like, that's who Dalton Locke is. And the nuance is lost in the way that we've received video for decades. There's no room for it. And so for me, the nuance is, because it's lost, most people just filter out something like foreign policy or our impact across the world or what other countries deal with or what politics looks like, because they go, that's all dark. That makes me feel bad. That makes me scared. Or people that are in it are lost in it, and it becomes their whole identity. And it becomes, it's blue team or red team, and these are the bad guys, and that's who's evil, and it's us versus them. So there seems to be people that have completely checked out, and they don't want to hear about what is going on in the world or what bill is up for, for the legislature to evaluate. And then there's people that are so obsessed with it that it is their entire identity. And so one thing that I'm trying to do, in addition to having a better story, is trying to show people that you cannot tune out of what's going on in the world. It does not serve you, because like the guy in the guillotine, you may not care about politics, but politics cares about you. Those legislation, whether it's on the state level or the federal level, whether it's your local community, those things do impact the price of your house, the additional fees you have to pay. It affects your price at the pump. I have a Tesla, so that's not my problem. And it affects everything in your life, whether or not you're willing to look at the things that impact them. And so you stick your head in the sand, or you get too obsessed with it. And then you get like mired in bias, because the people that are getting you into that, they have an agenda as well. I'm team red, I'm team blue. So my goal, in addition to spreading 100 million positive stories, is helping people look up, look at what's going on, take in information and ingest it, and then run it through your own analysis without the bias that it's coming with. Because Fox News is just as biased as MSNBC. And they have different camps and they have different goals. And I like that podcasting has become such an emergent forum that Tucker Carlson has the #1 show in the world. He surpassed Joe Rogan. That we have like hundreds of incredible, thousands of very successful podcasts that allow for nuance. And a story has nuance. A story, a really beautiful story, will touch your heart because there was something intimate about it. Therein lies the nuance. And if you soundbite everything, or you paint it in camp red or camp blue, you're missing the nuance of the human experience. And the news wants to tell you, or like most video mediums want to tell you, that outside it's a raging storm and everyone's like about to kill each other and it's crazy. But then like if you go outside and you meet people, you might be really surprised that everybody's just like, damn, it doesn't seem so bad out here.
On both sides.
On both sides.
Red, blue, in the middle, on both sides. Yeah. That is my experience everywhere I go. Yeah. Everywhere I go, I always meet great people. I don't know. I just feel I'm like, man, I don't know this world that we're speaking of, because this is not my world. And speaking of Morehouse, when we were interviewing him, I remember him leaning over to me and saying, it's because of men like me that you can feel that way. And I was like,
oh my gosh, thank you.
Yeah, exactly. Like it was, but it was another level of awareness that I was not aware of. So there's always different levels of awareness that we're going through, and
to double click
telling
on
those stories,
because people may not know. Like David was a special operations officer.
Oh yeah,
and
thank you.
So rough men stand at the ready to defend us in our warm beds, and most of us don't have that experience in our logbooks to say, I know what it's like to stand on the edge of my nation with an AR-15, my standard issue weapon, and be ready to put my body between a foreign adversary and the nation that I love.
Why did you never go into the military? I mean, I'm listening to you, and I get these insights, and I'm like, look, I know you're passionate about the country. I know you're passionate about the military. I know you're passionate about firearms. I know a lot of stuff you do in your own, your own private life. You're talking about how do we create these stories and so on. But like, you've got like such a military, like, I mean, even like what you're wearing almost at the point in time, you might as well have on some dog tags at the moment. So whatever held you back from the military? I mean, I know it's totally not where we were going, but this is a conversation.
The enlistment rate of the United States Armed Forces is the lowest it's ever been, historical lows. And I think that's disappointing, because you can serve in the military and not end up losing your life or sacrificing it. That is in the paperwork. That is always a possibility. But unless you're being deployed to a conflict zone, which there are, we're deployed in many conflict zones, usually you're going to come out of that with just pretty much a good experience. But in my dad's case, like I watched him go through an extensive military career, and he came out with a lot of injuries. It impacted his attitude, which having your back messed up, your knee, of course it's going to affect your mood. In spite of that, I thought maybe I would. I ended up serving a Mormon mission when I turned 19. And I thought if I come out of this and I don't feel like I have a real equitable skill set in the world, then I would probably go on the officer track, because I'm an Eagle Scout and they usually will let you go from enlisted to officer. So that was an option. But I learned American Sign Language, and I figured out that I had this way of communicating with people. Deaf people don't have tone in their voice because they can't hear anything. So the way that you convey that is with expressions. And so I figured out that I was often confused for a deaf person because I lived with one, and so I had to learn how to order lunch. So I had to learn very fast. Within 2 months, people were confusing me for a deaf person. It was like a miracle. People had never seen someone learn a language that fast because I was hyper obsessed with it. And I also realized I had a gift for a one-on-one communication, and I didn't. So when I got out of that, I thought, is the best way to use my gifts to perpetuate our nation's security, or is it to have more one-on-one interactions? And so it wasn't really like a hard, fast decision. It was always there on the horizon. And now, honestly, it's tough because the United States military is so co-opted by private interests. And so whereas I used to look at it as maybe with a lot more nobility and story, which it is, and every person that sacrificed for this nation has done it with nobility and for the perpetuation of our American supremacy, which I love and appreciate. At the same time, the cynical way that people approach it is like, I'm not going to go die for some oil company.
Yeah.
And that's really hard because, that's not what they feel like they're doing. But a lot of veterans will come out of the service, and after 4 years or 8 years enlisted, and then they renew, they'll look at it in retrospect and be like, I thought I signed up for something different.
My grandfather, I remember, he's been gone for a long time now, but I remember sitting at the table with him and we were watching CNBC or whatever we were doing, and he'd tell me a lot about Vietnam and about how he was a medic and all that stuff. And he would tell me that the country that he fought for was not the country that he fought for. And I was like, ooh, man, that's a lot. And as I have met a lot of soldiers and vets and, people have sacrificed so much for our country and our freedoms and so on. In retrospect, as you said, looking back at it, that they feel the same way very often. And they feel like they have been put up for fodder is the only way to put it.
Yeah, well, the meat grinder strategy, that has how, as an easy example, not to make a case about it one way or another, but Russia's main strategy right now in conventional warfare is the meat grinder strategy. There are people that are being pulled out of prisons, and they say, we will expedite your sentence if you go to the front lines in Donetsk or Avdiivka, and you go out there and you fight the Ukrainian front line and get chased down by an FPV drone. And that is the world that we're living in now, but it's not our immediate world.
Sure.
My thought is I can probably do more good by studying those things, by looking at the root cause of it, not just the headlines, and then trying and helping other people understand it. Because I think going back to the graph that showed there was this massive consciousness spike before 9/11, if I can impact the world with 100 million positive stories, William has this thing where he's like, if you think about it, if we're all one, then am I not Putin? And is there not something unresolved in me?
Right. It's anything that's resolved in somebody else that you notice.
Yeah.
And you ask, okay, what's resolved in me that makes me feel this way? Because we are all reflections of each other. Right now we're diving deep into consciousness, which is a whole other conversation right now that definitely I don't want to go too far off. But I was just curious, when you'd said that, hey, like I just kept listening to you and I've heard you a long time. And I thought, I wonder why that you never did that.
But I train. That's the thing.
I know you do.
That's where, and this is really important to me, is most people go, if I'm not going to be in the military, then I have no need to worry about myself. The things that they say in the military is there's no one coming to save you. You have to train like there is no one coming to save you. And that doesn't seem the most optimistic, but it is the most realistic. If you're on the receiving end of, say, a home invasion, and we're all safe and well, and our homes are safe and well, but let's say we're on the receiving end of that, you're now in a situation that you didn't ask to be in. What are you going to do? Are you going to suddenly download from the Matrix a whole bunch of hand-to-hand combat and firearm skills, and suddenly you've just got that on deck? Or did you prepare for a moment you didn't ask for, And in that moment are very thankful that you took that time to know how to handle a firearm, to know how to find your breath, to know how to have a good hand-eye coordination, line up a shot, and implement the castle doctrine. Defend your home, your wife, your children. I'm not going out and seeking problems, but sometimes problems find people.
Sure.
And so it behooves anybody that cares about prosperity and also their God-given right to defend themselves to know how to do that if the moment ever arises. And I pray that it never does.
Well, I think it wraps into, what you just said, right? When you're like, if you're always prepared, you don't have to like get ready to get prepared, right? Which is what I see here in this, wrapping it back in here, but what I see here in business, right? And that is that you're prepared. You're always ready to go. You're always moving forward. So how are you going to create this impact that you're talking about these stories and putting them out into the world and creating that? Like, how are you going to track these to your space? Like, what is going on here with Biggest?
We're in what I would call phase 2 of our business. And we're developing what phase 3 looks like. And that's where I lean on you. Like you're a client, but you're also like one of my closest friends and you're also a mentor because you're further down this road. And so I take everything from how I should look at my guys and my team to how do you structure out a more sophisticated 10-year business plan, right? For phase 2, at phase 1, we knew that podcasting was the most explosive new medium. In 2012, YouTube it had thousands of case studies. People are like, that's it. We peaked. That's YouTube. And there's really, you should have started your channel in 2007 because now there's really no room. Everyone's done everything. That's how they felt in 2012.
That's exactly how I felt in 2012.
And people were like, oh, okay, well, I'm just not going to start a channel then. Which is crazy because if you had started a channel in 2012 or 2016, like Logan Paul or David Dobrik.
Or today even.
Or today, if you had started it then and you had banged your head against the wall for 4 or 5 years, figuring out what your viewers actually like and figuring out what about you they want, through that painful iterative process, you would have found an unprecedented level of success and reach and magnitude. And so, it's easy to look in hindsight, but today you start today. Podcasting is in that same spot that YouTube was in 2012 because there was such an exponential jump in podcast adaptation into people's daily life during COVID because people felt like they were being lied to. And we talked about when we know that something is true, it rings true with you, or we know that something is false because it's not ringing true. I hear something and I go, that's not truth. I can't give you the data or the statistics or I can't show you the evidence as to why. But if it was truth, I would feel it. And we all know that. Like truth has a way of penetrating the language and resonating with our souls as that must be it. And people weren't getting that from conventional media. And so everyone shifted. They started going into long form discourse, into podcasts where there was nuance, where there was a real message. You can get a sense of who I am after an hour of listening to me. And I can't do that in a 30-second talking head. And so podcasting and long form media is YouTube in 2012. And so we knew that and we decided to architect our whole business model around it because I learned from you firsthand, you're like, I'm going to start this new show. Well, that means I've got to build a set. And that
it was a lot, man.
And
it
what's
was
an
a lot.
XLR cable? I need a specialist for the audio and I need a specialist for the cameras.
Yeah.
And then I need lighting experts. And then I had a set design come through. And I'm like, not everybody has the success and the resources that Dalton has to go through all of that, hire all these consultants and make it happen. So that
it was a lot of, so many mistakes. Like a lot of mistakes before I even met you. I was like, okay, I got to, but it was just something inside that said you need to do this, right? So it's like if something says you need to do it, it's not should I? It's like, okay, I'm going to do this. I just don't know how I'm going to do it. But one of my partners, he says all the time, first you build it, then they come. First you build it, then they come. It's not the other way around. They don't knock on your door and they say, hey,
where's your show?
We're ready for you. It's not that is not how it works. And so, yeah, man, it's been an adventure to figure that part out for sure. You've been a big help in that. But yeah.
Watching you, I had a thesis on that. I was like, I bet you people are having a hard time putting their podcast together from the technical
100%.
side.
I hear about it all the time. People want to buy our set.
Yeah.
And I'm like, we don't do that.
So then learning from you firsthand, I was like, you are 6 figures deep into trying to navigate this as far as like the hardware side of it. And that doesn't even touch the content. It has not even broached the editing. It has not even considered the deployment of it. And so if I figured out that there's a real pain point there and we fix all of that, we do pre-production, the production, post-production, and everything else. So that was phase one. As we go, people want their shows out there. We are your local broadcast station. And you don't need to go out and film car crashes. You can consolidate a message that matches your soul and your niche in the magazine world and package it into a video medium. We got you. The next phase of that is, well, I've actually spent a ton of time into YouTube. And so people have asked for us to start understanding their analytics and deciphering it. People don't know this. Like, YouTube has the most robust analytics tools of any social platform, of any medium in the world. Because YouTube is Google. It's a multi-trillion-dollar company, and it is wildly sophisticated. And there are stories on stories inside your analytics, which I've grown to understand pretty well. You can read the tea leaves. In content, I tell this to everybody that when I onboard them, I cannot guarantee that you will be an overnight success. In fact, I can guarantee you won't be. And I can't give you the silver bullet that's going to get you to your end destination directly. That is not how navigating the ocean works. Content, attention, and video is like chartering the Atlantic Ocean. It is changing. It is shifting. There are tides. There are factors that will impact the navigation of it. So you cannot control the ocean. And any worthwhile sailor worth their salt knows you cannot control the ocean. You must respect it. But you can control the boat that you're in. You can qualify the boat and make sure that it has all of the right accoutrements and steering and instrumentation. Maybe that's your message. Maybe that's your story or your channel. And then to navigate that ocean, you have to have a clear destination. What is our goal? And if you say, oh, it's an island, you have to be more specific than that. It's this one specific place on this island. So we hone down where it is you're going. Now you have an incredible vessel. It's well equipped, and you have a direction with which you're going. How do you navigate that vessel as the waves come? What if there's a storm? Adpocalypse, like from YouTube, or the COPPA Act, where YouTube changed all of these massive things and impacted all these channels. How do you know how to navigate the storm, even with the best boat and the clearest direction? So you can't control the ocean, but we give you the tools to craft your vessel, to be clear on where you're going, and then we know how to navigate the ocean. And so that's more or less where we've landed. That's our phase two, is let's get your channel in the direction we want to go. Yeah, we're going to get barreled by waves. You know, we post stuff and sometimes it explodes, and sometimes we think it's the best piece of content. We're like, dude, why didn't that
and
get
it falls
everywhere?
Flat. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I don't think, so what I've realized is that if you're creating content and if you're having, you're doing interviews, you're doing all these things because you're looking for the metrics and numbers and all of that, that's not the reason to do this. What I have learned the most, at least in my experience of doing this so far, is it gives the people that we bring onto the show the ability to have, so they have content. It gives them, so they can get their message out, so that I get to learn a couple things between our conversations, and I get to build new relationships, and it opens those relationships even wider and exposes me to things I'm not aware of. And it exposes me to different sides of the conversation, so that I'm not just focusing all my energy over here, and I can hear different points of views, and I can continue to ask, like, okay, who do you know that would be interesting to speak with?
Yeah.
Who can hold a room? Who is passionate about something, or who is creating something new, or what is the narrative over here? Because I always believe that we should be a student always. And so I'm like, cool, how can I continue to be a student? I told you, I said, I don't care about our metrics. Yes, they do matter, of course. And so I was laughingly saying, oh, we have 1,000 subscribers. Like, that's cool, great. I also know tomorrow morning I could wake up and YouTube could ban the channel. Like, I know that that's a possibility. They won't. Like, we're good there because we're not doing anything that they would want to do that.
Yeah, we can talk about COVID now.
But I'm just saying, like, then that's happened to many people. They wake up and everything they built, their platforms and all that is gone, right? So now they have to readjust and a bunch of things that way. But I think what's fun about this, it's fun for one, but what's fun is the creative process and the strategy side of it. And more importantly than that, for me than anything, it's the conversations that are being had, and it's allowing people to be able to feel safe and heard, and then they can express themselves. And when I leave an interview and somebody says, man, that was one of the best interviews I've ever had, and I think, I don't know what I'm doing. Brady taught me a couple different things. I'm constantly watching things, and those people that are at home and they're like, hey, listen, like, I got this. I got something inside of me that wants to be birthed, right? And what I notice is most people never birth it. Like, they feel it, it's coming, and then so they'll only go so far, and they say, it doesn't work.
And then on their deathbed, they wish they had.
They wish they would have put their message out to the world, right? And it took a while to get it out there, and it's still coming, and I'm still learning. And this is refining. It's like this cool ability to be able to look back and say, oh, okay, I've come this far, or I'm trying to explore the concepts of what it means to merge spirituality and capitalism and what it means to do something over here. And how do I take this modality, right? So for instance, right now we're here with David Morehouse and learning remote viewing the last couple of days, which is a really, really unique
You're
experience.
really good at it, by the way.
It's, well, I don't know about that, but it is fascinating to have to just sit there in the unknown. You're just in the unknown. You don't know what's going on. And so, but to be able to take that and think, okay, how do I apply this to my life? How do I apply this into business? How do I apply this in creating community? How do I apply this for us to create more peace or wealth or, creativity? Like, how do you apply those things in life? And so it's always taking modalities over here for me personally and combining them over here. And it's like, okay, now all of a sudden I've got people coming into the fold that I'm not the expert on any of these things, but I got people coming into the fold right now because they're seeing this content and they're coming up, and I've got, some people in the class who are like, man, I saw that show you did. It was amazing. And then, but they're coming up and they're saying, hey, I would like to do something with you, or I would like to figure out how we could work together. Or, some of the things you're saying, they're wrong. Like, they're just not right. I'm like, cool, tell me
You've
more.
had someone say that?
I have had these things come up.
That's
Yes.
wild.
Yes, I have had these things come up. Like,
That's awesome.
They're like, I don't think you can bend spirituality and capitalism together. I've never seen it happen before. And I'm like, just because we haven't seen something happen before doesn't mean that we can't create something.
Well said.
Right? Because the world is shifting and changing, like technology and AI and content and so on. And when it comes to that, actually speaking of that content in general, I mean, there's Notebook that just came out by Google that is tying into other programs like HeyGen, which for those that don't know, HeyGen is an ability for me to be able to film myself, and it makes it look like I'm talking. I've seen 2 of them last night, by the way. It would have been you and me. They fed the content into there. They got our voices, and they did full-on podcasts.
In Spanish. Oh, okay. You're not even talking about the language translation
No, I'm
service.
talking, they did full-on podcasts.
Wow.
They just took each other's content. They had to ask questions. They did a full-on conversation very easily. So with the world shifting as it is, right, authenticity, but with the world shifting as it is, and I believe that like the short form content, even though we do it, right, I think it's going to become something that is going to be of the dinosaurs eventually. How does somebody stay relevant in this market? Because it is shifting so damn fast. Like for those people that are looking at that, they're thinking at home like, hey, I want to do this, but I really don't know if I should do it. I don't know if I want to put money into it, time, energy, effort, because I'm going to be eaten up by the bots.
Yeah.
What's your thoughts on this?
2 of them. The first thing is that if you're going to get passed by somebody using AI tools if you don't use them. So they're not meant to replace humanity. They're meant to expedite it. At some point, AGI that's a different conversation, but for now they are tools. And the only person that's going to pass you is someone using those tools better than you. The second thing is there's going to be surely like some audience for it, but nobody really wants to listen to what a robot has to say. So you look at yourself and you go, what makes me different from the robot? And in that question, and double clicking on that question 100 times, you will find the thing that makes you consumable to other people, because you're not a robot. You went to school, you made friends, you lost friends, you got a job, you hated it, you had these stories, you missed a ton of opportunities, you wallowed in your grief, you found new friends, you fell in love. The robots aren't doing that. The robots can simulate that and pass the Turing test, but it's not obvious to me that that's going to be substantial, and that I would the second I get that notification, oh my gosh, I got to listen to the new robot show. People will do it as a gimmick. This is my forecasting, but I really don't see 2 robots sitting there having a conversation and me going, man, that was substantial. Now they may actually have conversations around things I'm interested in, but I would just as soon go read a news article. So what is it that makes you different from what is it that you have that the robot doesn't? And then also you must be using the robots.
Yeah, it's again, back to co-creation, right? You're co-creating constantly. I am co-creating with AI all the time, as you know. I'm the one since we've started this journey, I'm like, look at this tool, look at this thing.
It's crazy.
Look at
Pono
that
is
thing.
amazing,
This
by the
thing's
way.
coming out. We got this coming out. Yeah, it is awesome. And as we continue to grow the world around us, right, it is going to continue to shift and change. And I can promise you, by the time I just talked about HeyGen and what we're talking about now, this won't be out for a while. it'll be long gone. And what's happening in the tech world, as far as when it comes to producing content, AI, videos being created and all that stuff, it'll be light years ahead, even if this was 2-3 months ago when this was filmed.
I might push it up sooner.
I'm just saying, like,
I might put it out next week.
but you never know, right? Like, it's this concept of like, hey, things are shifting and changing so fast in the world, right? So it's keeping up with all of that. But I know that as far as for time goes, when you have been working, with the spiritual capitalists, you've had to think about this question a lot. And so most of the time when I ask this question to people, they know it's coming. But you already know it's coming because you edit these videos.
I hear it every episode.
I know. So what does spiritual capitalism mean to you? And how can you apply that to your current business?
I thought you were going to ask me, what do I want my life to be like or what do I want to be remembered for? You used to ask that question a lot.
I still ask that question.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll still get into that.
Okay, don't deprive me of that.
Yeah, we got that. You've been writing it down in your journal for the last couple of weeks, getting ready. So it's good to go.
I see too many people get good at business and then they have this like darkness in their soul. And we study value levels. We know them very well.
Right.
So the 30-second rundown of value levels, it used to be called spiral dynamics. It's a core tenet of neurolinguistic programming, which is the thing that brought you and I together. Mm-hmm. In a value level 1, there's a handful of value levels. What do you value as the lens with which you look at the world? And this tool is kind of like a yardstick for measuring how evolved somebody is. So a value level 1 would be a baby. A baby has no comprehension of you or what you want, or it's just, I need to eat. I am scared if I get dropped. There is no awareness of anyone outside, and that's a baby. A value level 2 is someone that's kind of grown out of that and realizes that, hey, if you're a caveman, it's a lonely world. It's better to stick with other cavemen. Hide in the cave, stay together, protection. And we are a tribe. In the world out there, it's a storm, and it happens to us. And as long as we listen to our tribe leader and as long as we have each other, things can happen to us, and it's okay. It may not be fair and we can't control it, but it's okay. We have the tribe. And that's a value level 2. A value level 3 is the first caveman in that group that says, I bet you I can go out there. And all of us, we probably need spears. I'll go make spears and I'll sell them to everybody else. And I will be the number one. I'll be the leader. And in order for me to win, you have to lose. I will be the best. And if anyone tries to subvert my spear business, I'll take you down, which is that dog eat dog, Shark Tank world where in order for me to win, that person must lose. I've met a lot of people like that. It kind of prevented me from wanting to get into business because that's just not who I am. The person that figures out that you can win, that's an evolutionary leap. Going from I work for somebody else always to I can work with. That's a big leap. But your mindset has not changed. You're taking, and you may not change from that. A value level 4, has looked at the spears salesman, looked at the people hiding in caves, the groups, and said, I can probably control all of them. I'll create a government. I'll create a company they all work in. I'll create a religion that they all follow. I'll create some kind of system that congeals all of them together, a nationality, a shared trait, and then I will create the outline of that. And if I can do that with the goal of perpetuating and protecting and making us last longer and then also serving myself, if I can create that system, I will have all of these serfs or whoever inside my system. That's a value level 4, is the ability to control everybody under a system. And most people are somewhere between a 2 and a 3. The people that architect governments or religions, which is kind of a charged thing to say. Some people might really not like that, but like look at a religion that maybe you don't agree with and you're like, oh, that's an organization that more or less controls people's thoughts, not yours or whatever. A 5 looks at all of that and says, I just need to figure out how to leverage all of that. And then the 5 says, I'm going to find 5 people around me and I'm going to help every one of them win. And if I have 5 people that I've helped win, those 5 people are going to help me win. I don't have to take you out in order to win in my business. I don't have to kill you. I'm going to help all of us win, and then we'll win together. And I can't really resonate with the 3s and the 2s. I definitely don't like the 4s because they're trying to put a system around me. And so these tiers make us go up and up and up. And so spiritual capitalism, to me, to answer your question, is the ability to embrace a 5 and take pieces of every single step along the way. We are all in this together as a 2. We do have the ability to go out and win as a 3. We should find some commonality and some common thread that keeps us all together, and we should have rules that govern all of us so that we're all playing fair. But I also want to go win and win endlessly and win effortlessly as a 5. So those 2 things are not in separate silos, incompatible and forever in perpetuity against each other. They are together, but how far I'm willing to look ahead or how evolved I'm willing to be and how much crap I'm willing to eat to learn that lesson, that will determine how far I rank on that thing and how much better a spiritual capitalist I become. So it really is just a willingness. And so how willing are you to be spiritual and to win in life?
Well said. I mean, that was such a diagram that you drew up visually, for the audience, right? And William Lamb, when he explained that same thing to me, like, I knew a little bit about spiral dynamics, but then we started talking about value systems. I was like, oh man, this really opened my eyes to see how a lot of the world views the world and how other people view me and how people view them. And it's like, and it just depends where we're at on our journeys, right?
Yes.
And so, yes, when we stand in a point in time of like, how do I help people get what they want? So that in return, you're not doing it for that, but it's like almost a byproduct of it, right? But you do still have to be like, okay, look, this is what I'm creating, and through my creation, by impacting others, it'll of course ripple down or up or however you want to look at it, back to yourself or back to your organization or back to whatever it is, right? So very well said. It's such a unique way of viewing the world, and I guess again, this is a shout out for William Lamb. If you're not sure if this content, as far as on value systems, resonates, like go check his stuff out because it really taught me a ton of things. And that is why when I met William and he told me his goal is to upgrade humanity, I was like, all right, we can let's play that game. Let's see what this looks like. And from his perspective, I see how much he teaches and what he does, even here. And I see how he's expanding the way he thinks, because a year ago, he didn't think like he thought today. And he's finding new tools, new technologies, and he's always pushing the envelope of what is possible, and also going backwards and be like, oh, what I thought was the case is not the case. And so we have to have that ability to be able to kind of move back and forth, I think, as we're all exploring this thought process. So for my last question then, because you already knew it was coming, and you asked me to ask you anyways.
And I think the event's about to start, so we got to get you back in there.
But what is it you want to be remembered for?
Every person I touched, they felt more loved.
That's perfect.
That's all of it. And you deserve more. You deserve more for the simple reason that you are. And if you don't feel like you deserve more, at some point you just made that decision, or someone made that decision for you. Just find it and get rid of it, because you just deserve more. And you made a mistake. Oh my God. Everybody's made mistakes, and some are egregious, but you can change and deserve more.
Yeah, we can all shift and all change, and we are constantly, every day, changing. And I hope you realize that as well for yourself.
You've helped me see that. I appreciate you, man.
Absolutely, man. And I appreciate everything you've done for the Spiritual Capitalists. I appreciate what you do with the team, how you and your team show up on a weekly basis, and you tell us what to do and where to go, and help us post things and make my life a lot easier that way. Not to say there's no work for what we're doing on, as far as on the interviewing side and guests and all that, but you make it look really beautiful on the other side, because behind it, it's like making the sausage. It's a little ugly on the back end, right? And there's a little bit of frustrations and so on, but
look at this room.
I know,
look at the result.
Facts. Like, I know you understand that, and so that's one of the reasons I love working with you, because you're not just some guy selling me something, or you're not some employee behind the scene. You're like, look, I want to create impact. I want to share stories. I want to do it creatively. I want to do what I love to do, and I'm going to put my money, my time, my energy, and my mouth right where it is that I'm pushing towards. And I'm like, cool. So again, I'm going to help you get what you want, and in byproduct, I'm going to get what I want. Absolutely. So I really appreciate it, man.
Let's change the world.
Absolutely. And we are. All right, brother.
Appreciate you, man.
Cheers, man.